Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. This is the story of how I found out what my husband's parents were really like, and how I fought back without becoming like them. My father-in-law smiled as he gave me the wine glass. His eyes looked kind, but I could tell something was wrong. "Something special for our amazing daughter-in-law," he said. His voice sounded sweet, but it felt fake. I said thank you, and waited until he turned away. Then, I quietly switched glasses with his wife. She had been asking rude questions about my job all evening. 20 minutes later, she was sick in the bathroom. My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm 34 years old. I help fashion companies become more earth-friendly from my home office in Portland, Oregon. What started as a small side job helping small brands find better ways to make clothes has grown into something I'm really proud of. Now I work with big stores, speak at business meetings, and have a long list of clients who care about both looking good and helping the planet. But to my husband's parents, especially Robert Sterling, what I do has always been just a little tree-hugging hobby. He works for a big drug company. He's the kind of man who thinks you're only successful if you have a corner office and make lots of money. Every time we visit, it's the same thing. Margaret fusses over her son, while Robert asks me hard questions about how much money I make. Like caring about the planet doesn't matter at all. My husband David would sit next to me during these talks. His jaw would get tight because he was angry, but trying not to show it. After each dinner, he'd say sorry for how they acted. He promised it would get better with time. I believed him for 4 years. I had just come back from a really hard week. In Bangladesh, I was checking factories to make sure they treated workers fairly. The work was important but really tiring. 12 hours a day in very hot weather, writing reports about how companies could do better. All I wanted was a quiet night at home, but David reminded me we couldn't miss his mother's anniversary party. Just a few hours, he promised. He'd said those same words many times before. The evening started like always. Robert talked about his business deals, while Margaret made mean comments about my strange career choice. I drank sparkling water and thought about when we could leave. After dinner, Robert said he had opened a special bottle of wine from their collection. He went to their expensive wine room and came back with a fancy bottle and crystal glasses. As he poured the wine, I noticed he handled 2 glasses differently from the others. One he set aside just for me. When he came over with my glass, I saw something that scared me. There was something barely visible inside the crystal that looked like oil on water. His smile never changed as he handed it to me like he was giving me a gift. "This wine is very special," he said, watching me carefully. "It might take a moment to feel its full effect." My throat felt tight. I took the glass with steady hands and said nice things about his choice while my mind was racing. When he turned to give wine to others, I quietly put my glass on a side table and picked up Margaret's instead. She was too busy telling David's sister mean things about her recent divorce to notice what I did. I watched Margaret drink while I talked about the wine. My heart was beating really fast. Within 20 minutes, she looked sick and was sweating. She ran from the table with her hand over her mouth. We could hear her being very sick in the bathroom. Robert's face went white when he realized what happened. He looked at me from across the table, and right then, we both knew exactly what had happened. His confident smile disappeared and was replaced by something that looked like fear. I didn't say anything, didn't yell at him. I just kept eating my dessert while David and his sister ran to check on Margaret. While everyone was confused, Robert saying it must have been bad food, Margaret moaning about being sick, I quietly put the glass that was meant for me into my purse. Something big had changed inside me. I was angry, but it wasn't hot anger. It was cold and clear. I wasn't going to let this go, but I wasn't going to fight the way they would. I was going to make them see exactly what kind of people they really were. The next Monday, I took the glass to Maya. She used to be my client and now runs a lab that tests for poisons. She'd helped me test fabric dyes for harmful chemicals before. Is this personal or work? she asked when I told her what I needed. Family problem, I said carefully. 3 days later, she called with news that made my hand shake. Victoria, there were sleeping pills in that wine. Not enough to really hurt you, but enough to make you sleepy, confused, and forget things. Where did this come from? I thanked her and asked for a written report. I didn't answer her other questions. That evening, I told David we should skip the next few family dinners. I said I needed to focus on a big work presentation. He was sad, but understood. I didn't tell him about the test results yet. I needed to learn more first. Over the next few weeks, I did some research. Margaret had sleeping pill prescriptions from different doctors and had been taking more and more pills for months. I also found out scary stories from their friends, people saying she acted strange at parties, that she might have stolen jewelry at her country club, stories that Robert had worked hard to hide. I put everything together and waited for the right time. It came when Margaret called David and specifically asked me to take photos for their holiday card. She has such a good eye for art, Margaret told him sweetly. I'd love her professional help. David was shocked because they usually didn't care about my work. I said yes right away. The next weekend, I went to their big, fancy house alone. I had my camera bag in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Margaret was waiting, wearing an expensive silk shirt, her makeup perfect even though her hands were shaking a little. Robert's playing golf, she said nervously. I thought we could start without him. Before we begin, I said quietly, I think you should see this. I gave her the envelope with the poison test results and copies of her pill prescriptions from different doctors. Her fancy manicured fingers shook as she read. Her face went through confusion, denial, and finally fear. This is crazy, she whispered. I would never. We both know what happened, I stopped her. What I want to know is why. She broke down. You don't belong in this family. You never will. David needs someone who understands his world, not someone who travels to poor countries, for causes. And putting sleeping pills in your son's wife's drink helps him? She jumped at how direct I was. It wasn't meant to hurt you, just make you sick enough to miss that big presentation you keep talking about. Show David that your work makes you unreliable. How cold and planned her voice sounded scared me. Here's what happens next, I said calmly. You're going to tell Robert what you did. Then you're both going to start treating me with respect. Not because you like me now, but because if you don't, David will learn exactly what kind of people his parents really are. Margaret laughed, but it sounded fake and scary. He'll never believe you instead of us. I picked up my camera bag. Maybe not, but he'll believe the lab test, the prescription records, and the stories from people you've hurt. Do you want to risk losing your son over that? I left without taking any photos. That evening, Margaret called David crying and said I'd been mean and threatening during our meeting. When David asked me about it, I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I showed him everything. The lab test, the pill evidence, even text messages from his mother that had gotten meaner and meaner over the years. My mother wouldn't do this, he kept saying, but his voice didn't sound sure. The next day, he talked to his parents alone. When he came back, his eyes were red and empty. Dad says it's all a misunderstanding, he said quietly. That you're trying to cause problems because you feel like you don't fit in. What do you think? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, I think my parents have been lying to me my whole life. For the next 2 weeks, David barely talked to his parents or me. He was thinking about years of being controlled, questioning every family moment, every relationship that had ended strangely. I worked a lot, knowing that if I pushed him to choose sides, it would only push him away. Then a package came with no return address, just my name written by someone I didn't know. Inside was a computer drive and a note. "You need to see this. Elena." Elena was married to David's brother Marcus. The drive had security camera videos from Robert and Margaret's house from the night of the dinner. There was Margaret, clearly putting something in my wine glass. There was me, switching the glasses. There was Margaret drinking from the glass, with the pills. But there were more videos from after we left. Margaret screaming at Robert, blaming him for not warning her about the switch. Robert yelled back, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." I watched the videos many times feeling sick. Not just proof of what Margaret did, but proof that this had happened before. Proof that Robert knew. The next video showed Margaret and Robert 2 days later, planning in their living room. "She knows what you did," Robert said calmly. "So what? It's her word against mine. David will never choose her over family." "Don't be so sure. She's not like the others." Margaret's laugh was cold. "Don't worry. I've already started telling him about their marriage problems. By the time I'm done, he'll want a divorce and think it was his idea." I closed my laptop, hands shaking. This wasn't about me. It was about controlling David's whole life. They'd been pushing away anyone who helped him be independent. I called Elena right away. "Why did you send this to me?" "Because they did the same thing to Marcus and me," she said quietly. "Spent 3 years trying to break us up. Told him I was only after his money. It almost worked. Why didn't you tell us? Marcus doesn't know. He loves his father and believes everything he says. I've tried to tell him, but he thinks I'm being paranoid. I couldn't watch them destroy another marriage." The next day, Robert texted me. "We should talk. Woman to woman. No husbands." I met him at his private club, in a fancy wood-paneled room that smelled like old money and old ideas. He was waiting with a martini, his face hard to read. "Victoria?" he started smoothly. "Families are complicated. Margaret can be protective, but she means well. Putting sleeping pills in someone's drink means well?" He waved his hand like it didn't matter. "A misunderstanding. Margaret takes pills for being nervous. She probably got confused about how much to take. I have the security camera videos, Robert." His fake face disappeared instantly, showing something cold and calculating. "What do you want? Money? A job at one of my companies?" "I want you both to leave us alone. Stop trying to convince David I'm not good enough. Stop messing with our marriage." Robert leaned forward. "You think this is our first time dealing with someone like you? We've handled gold diggers before. People who want to use our family." He smiled coldly. "David will come home where he belongs. He always does. Ask him about Sarah, his fiancée before you." My blood felt like ice. "What are you talking about?" "David was engaged before he met you. Nice girl. Doctor. We didn't like her background. Took us 8 months to convince him she was wrong for him. She was heartbroken when he broke it off." His smile got bigger. History likes to repeat itself. On the drive home, I called David's college friend Tyler. When I asked about Sarah, he sighed heavily. God, that was so sad. She was perfect for him. But his parents, they convinced him she was using him. They made up proof that she was cheating. By the time the truth came out, David didn't trust her anymore. Now I could see the pattern clearly. This wasn't about me. It was about total control over their son's life. And they'd won before. I didn't talk to David about this right away. Instead, I collected every piece of proof I could find. I contacted Sarah, who didn't want to talk at first, but finally shared old emails and texts showing how Robert and Margaret had slowly destroyed their relationship. I talked to other ex-girlfriends and old friends of David's who had mysteriously disappeared from his life. The pattern was always the same. Anyone who helped David be independent was slowly pushed away. Elena gave me more security videos showing Robert and Margaret discussing their plans for us. Once they get divorced, we'll convince him to move back home, Robert said in one video. He can work for the company and meet the right kind of women. I put everything on one computer drive. Then I invited Marcus and Elena over for dinner without telling David the real reason. I was about to destroy his family's fake image, and I wanted witnesses. After dessert, I connected my laptop to our TV. There's something you all need to see, I said. For the next hour, we watched the videos together. David sat very still, his face white. Marcus kept shaking his head, saying, "That's not my parents," quietly. When it was over, David turned to me with tears running down his face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed you to see for yourself," I said. "All of it. Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your whole life." Marcus stood up, angry. "This is fake. You changed these videos. My parents wouldn't do this." Elena touched his arm gently. "They did it to us, Marcus. That's why they suddenly started liking me after we had the baby. A grandchild gave them power over us." Marcus's face went white. "You never told me." "I tried," she whispered. "You wouldn't listen." Later that night, David held me close in our bed. "I need time to think about this," he said softly. "But I believe you, and I'm sorry I ever doubted you." The next morning, Margaret called David, and he put her on speakerphone so I could hear. "Honey, I was thinking you should come stay with us for a while," Margaret said brightly. "Marriage is hard, and sometimes being apart helps you think clearly." "Mom?" David stopped her. "I've seen the videos." Silence. Then, "What videos?" "The security camera videos of you putting sleeping pills in Victoria's wine. Of you and Dad planning to end my marriage." Another pause. "David, whatever she's shown, you is fake. You know Victoria has always been jealous of our family." "Stop," David said firmly. "We're coming over tonight. All of us. Marcus, Elena, Victoria, and me. We're going to talk about this as a family. No more lies." After he hung up, David turned to me. "They'll deny everything. Try to make you look like the bad guy again." I nodded. "I know. So what do we do?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "It's time your parents met the real me. The one who doesn't just help fashion companies but knows how to document the truth." That evening, we went to Robert and Margaret's house with my camera equipment. Marcus and Elena were already there, sitting stiffly in the fancy living room. Robert looked confident, like he was in charge. "I understand there's been some confusion," he started. "No confusion." I stopped him, setting up my camera on a tripod. "I'm recording this conversation for the family record," Margaret complained right away. "This is private family business." "Exactly," I agreed. "Family business. And I'm family, even though you've spent years trying to change that." For the next 2 hours, we talked about everything. The poisoned wine, the manipulation, Sarah, the pattern of control that had shaped both David and Marcus's lives. Robert and Margaret denied everything, of course, calling me crazy and manipulative. But every time they denied something, I played another video or showed another email. Their faces got whiter, and their arguments got weaker. Finally, David stood up. "I love you both. You're my parents. But what you've done is terrible. You don't get to control my life anymore." Marcus nodded slowly. "We're adults. We choose our own partners and our own lives." Margaret started crying, not because she was sorry, but because she realized she was losing control. Robert looked shocked, like he couldn't believe his sons were standing up to him. As we got ready to leave, I gave Robert a computer drive. "This has everything. The videos, the emails, all the proof. It's yours to keep." What's that supposed to mean? He asked suspiciously. It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this with other people. That would hurt David, and I would never do that. I stopped for a moment. But if you ever try to mess with our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate David or work against me, copies will go to everyone at your country club, your business partners, and all your social friends. For the first time since I'd met him, Robert looked at me with something like respect. I underestimated you. Yes, I said simply. You did. 6 months went by. David and Marcus started going to therapy to work through the damage their parents had caused. Robert and Margaret stayed away, sending occasional text messages, but respecting the limits we'd set. Then, during the holidays, they invited us all to dinner. A fresh start, the invitation said. David wanted to go. They're still my parents, he said, and they seem to be trying. I agreed, but I wasn't silly enough to believe people like that really change. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Margaret had made a big fancy meal, and Robert was charming, asking about my latest work projects like he really cared. After dinner, Robert invited me into his study. I have an offer for you, he said, pouring himself a drink. I've been thinking about your work, helping companies be more earth-friendly. It's been good for you. But have you thought about expanding? I could bring you into our company's responsibility department. The salary would be huge. I took the glass he offered, but didn't drink. Why would you offer me that? Your family, he said smoothly. And I respect how you handled our disagreement. You protected David while standing your ground. That's what a strong woman does. I put the glass down without drinking. I appreciate the offer, but no. His smile got tight. Victoria, be reasonable. This is me trying to make peace. No, I said again. It's another attempt to control me. You can't buy me, Robert. And you can't stand the fact that David loves me exactly as I am. Don't be stupid, he said angrily, dropping his fake nice act. Everyone has a price. I stood up. That's where you're wrong, and that's why you'll never understand your son. I went back to the dining room, where Margaret was showing David old photo albums. Look at these, she was saying. You were so happy when you lived at home. David saw my face from across the room. He could tell something had happened. I nodded, slightly, and he stood up. Mom, Dad, he said clearly. Victoria and I have something to tell you. Everyone looked at him. We're having a baby. Victoria is 12 weeks pregnant. The shock on their faces was real. Margaret recovered first, rushing to hug me with tears in her eyes. Robert came over more slowly, looking back and forth between David and me. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied, then lowered my voice so only he could hear. This child will never be used in your games. I promise you that. His face got hard, but he nodded, understanding my message clearly. As we drove home that night, David squeezed my hand. They'll never change, will they? No, I said honestly. But they'll have to accept that we have. 3 weeks later, a legal letter came from Robert's lawyer. Inside was a deed to a house, our house, which we'd been renting, and legal papers setting up a trust fund for our unborn child. There was no note, no conditions, just the transfer of property, clean and final. It wasn't an apology. Robert couldn't do that. But it was him admitting that we had won. Our son was born in early summer. We named him Oliver, after my grandfather. When Robert and Margaret came to the hospital, they brought gifts but kept their distance. They cooed over the baby, took photos and left without giving us unwanted parenting advice or lectures about money. Months passed. Our relationship with them became something like normal. They never said sorry for what they'd done, but they stopped trying to control David's life or hurt my career. One evening, as I was working on a sustainability report in my home office, David came in carrying Oliver. "My mother called," he said. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from my computer. "What do you want to do?" "I think we should go," he replied. "But with rules. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want to leave. No alone time with Oliver." I nodded. "Sounds good." He sat down next to me, bouncing the baby gently. "You know, I used to think success meant making my parents happy, getting their approval, meeting their expectations." He looked down at our son, then back at me. "Now I know it's about making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people I love." 2 weeks before Christmas, a big envelope came from Robert. Inside was a fancy business report featuring my consulting work throughout. My recommendations had been used across multiple departments, and the environmental impact was huge. There was a short note. "Hired the best consultant I know. Thought you'd want a copy." It wasn't forgiveness or making up. It was something else. Respect. Maybe admitting that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about being grateful. It was about recognizing the new reality, the new boundaries. That spring, I opened my own office space in downtown Portland. At the grand opening, David stood beside me, Oliver on his hip. My parents flew in from San Francisco. Clients and colleagues filled the space, talking about sustainable practices and ethical business. Robert and Margaret came too, arriving near the end of the evening. They didn't stay long. Margaret held Oliver briefly while David watched carefully. Robert shook my hand, nodded at the displays with real approval, and left without offering any suggestions about how I should run my business. As we locked up that night, David asked, "Do you think they've changed?" I thought about the question, carefully. "No," I said finally. "But they've accepted that they can't change us. And sometimes that's enough." Later, as we sat on our back deck watching the stars come out over the Portland skyline, Oliver asleep in his crib upstairs, I realized something I'd never fully put into words before. I hadn't won by playing Robert and Margaret's game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I'd stood my ground, protected what mattered, and built my life according to my own definition of success. Not through manipulation or tricks, but through truth and quiet determination. In the end, that was the most satisfying victory of all, living honestly on my own terms, with the family I loved beside me. What would you have done in Victoria's situation? Have you ever had family members who tried to control your life or hurt your relationships? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fighting fire with fire, but standing firm in your truth and refusing to play their games. If this story spoke to you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them most. And if you've dealt with similar family problems, remember, you're not alone, and you deserve relationships built on respect, not control. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with difficult in-laws. Sometimes sharing our stories helps others find the courage to stand up for themselves too.